Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Two heavyweight prospects are back in action this weekend. Arslanbek Makhmudov, the Russian who fights out of Canada, he'll be facing Dillon Carman in Canada. And then you have Nathan Gorman, who returns after more than a year out of the ring. He'll be facing the exciting Richard Lartey, who did back up Daniel Dubois a couple of times in their fight more than a year ago, and actually both are coming into this fight against each other off losses to Daniel Dubois. But let's start with Arslanbek Makhmudov first, the Russian who's currently 10-0. He's got 10 knockouts. His last fight was in December 2019. He probably would have fought earlier this year, but obviously the pandemic sort of had put plans off for a bit. And he's going to be facing Dillon Carman, the Canadian who is actually a decent heavyweight. He's a guy who has sprung the odd upset over the years, including against a prospect, Simon Keane, a couple of years ago, but Keane went on to avenge that loss. And actually Carmen himself, he's coming off a loss heading into this fight. He fought Yevgeny Romanov in 2019 and was sparked in a round. So I'm not going to mince words here. I do think that Arslanbek Makhmudov is going to win this fight. I do think that it's going to be for as long as it lasts. And Makhmudov is going to go in there and look to bulldoze Carmen. But Carmen, you know, he can punch, as he proved against Simon Keane. He is a decent puncher, but I think that the pressure from Makhmudov and the weight of the punches, I think he is going to find a home for either the right hand or the right uppercut, his favourite punches. And it will probably, in my view, be over inside 3 rounds, possibly even earlier. But I do think that this is going to be a case that Makhmudov is going to come out looking for the kill, and he's going to get it. But there will be some opportunities for Carmen to land some shots on Makhmudov, who is not a defensive maestro by any stretch, but he's a fun fighter. He's a guy who's in one of my favorite sort of prospects at the moment because of his all-action style. But he does sort of have the power, but also potentially, the volume and the skills, just his skill set in general, to take him a decent way in the sport. And I'm not saying that he could go on to win a title, because obviously these things are not sort of set in stone. But he's a guy who's going to be in a lot of fun fights, and he's going to probably beat some guys that are considered at least better boxers, better technically at least, that they could probably outpoint him. But this guy is always going to be in a fight with his power and his tenacity. He's just going to come forward looking for the kill. And actually, just before I move on to the Gorman fight, a couple of other things with Arslanbek Makhmudov. Heading into this fight, he looks like he's going to be in good shape, and I had wondered about that because back in July, he posted a shot where he is looking a little bit thick, during COVID, all that sort of stuff. But here is a graphic. So on the left-hand side from July, where he was sort of had his COVID armor on, and then on the right-hand side, which was just a post from about a week or so ago. So clearly he has been training quite hard in recent months, preparing for his first fight back. So he'll probably weigh in somewhere around 260 pounds there or thereabouts. That is generally his sort of fight weight. And he does, for a guy who's 6'5", 6'5.5", I should say, carry the 260 quite well. But clearly he's been putting in the hard yards. And the other thing I would say is that Arslanbek Makhmudov starting to get a little bit more traction with the mainstream media. I've noticed that Top Rank have been mentioning him in the same breath as the other sort of top prospects, the Olympians like Tony Yoka, also Filip Hrgovic, Daniel Dubois, who wasn't an Olympian but is considered the best prospect running around right now. They're mentioning Makhmudov in the same breath. And it has been a bit of a hard road to hoe for Makhmudov to try get some profile and a bit more broader than the sort of Canadian scene, because he had been campaigning, toiling away in obscurity for some time. It was only sort of more from about 2018, early 2019, where he started to, get people sort of looking, going, yeah, actually this guy, there's something about him. And actually one of the channels that I watch a lot, Del Boys Boxing News, he actually was talking about some of this. Blue Collar Sports TV, he now goes by. He was saying that it's a shame a lot of people aren't talking more about Arslanbek Makhmudov, and that he is a guy that is sort of criminally underrated, at least in terms of the profile sense. And I agree to a large extent, but I think some of that is because of the way that he has been managed, because he has been campaigning in Canada, so there's an element of out of sight, out of mind. And then that's a similar thing for Tony Yoka as well. A lot of people haven't really been looking his way because he's been fighting in France. But in Makhmudov's case as well, his fights have basically been on a pay-per-view behind a paywall. So this fight, the broadcast details, you can catch it on punchinggrace.com. And it's one of these things you have to get a subscription, so you have to pay out what I think for me converted it was about $38 for a 3-month subscription to get access to it for this weekend, and obviously for the next 3 months. So I'm hoping they do schedule another fight soon so I can kind of get basically 2 for 1. But it's those sorts of things behind a paywall that do sort of hinder, the broader sort of, casual sort of boxing fan starting to become aware of some of these guys who are, among the top prospects coming through. I mean, even among more hardcore boxing fans, because there hadn't been too much footage around. It took a while for things to sort of filter through, but he has signed a co-promotional deal to fight on DAZN. He will be promoted by Golden Boy on a co-promotional basis, but that deal that was signed earlier in 2020 hasn't been able to take it up because of the pandemics, and who knows when he will get his first fight in America. But once that does commence, his profile I think is going to grow more exponentially because of just broader exposure. He's going to be more accessible to a lot more people. And if you want to find out more about Arslanbek Makhmudov, some of his previous fights, I did over the pandemic period do a documentary, and this was in conjunction with his current promoters. They allowed me to use some footage, so that was great of them, and they even gave me an interview clip, so I do thank them for that. That's Eye of the Tiger Management, who co-promotes Arslanbek Makhmudov, and that link to that video, that is in the description box as well as in the pinned comment for this video. And I've also put in the same place 2 other videos. One was the announcement video of this fight from about 10 days ago, and also Nathan Gorman and Richard Lartey, which we will move on to now. So Gorman and Lottie facing off this weekend in the UK. It's the first fight for both since a loss to Daniel Dubois in 2019 for both of them. So it is a rebuild job for Nathan Gorman to some extent, but there's a couple of comments that they've made at the press conference, and I've got a couple of graphics here, so we'll start with Nathan Gorman. So you can see here, he says, "This is a different Nathan Gorman to 16 months ago. I could have taken a 6-rounder, but if I beat Lartey, I can push on for titles. I'm sure the winner of Dubois vs. Joyce will vacate the Commonwealth title, and I can get that title." So Gorman says this is a different him to 16 months ago. But in what way? I'm not really sure, because if you see here, this is a face-off with him and Lartey. Nathan Gorman, to me, looks largely the same Nathan Gorman from 16 months ago. It doesn't look like he's sort of dedicated him to the gym, that he's like transformed his body as sometimes fighters do after a loss. One of the things that he could have done was get in better shape. I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, and it's not to say that he has to look like the body beautiful, but for him and his style, if this fight starts to go deeper into it, and he's got issues with his gas tank because he's carrying some unnecessary rubble, well, he can obviously do something about that. And there has been a few instances in fights where he's looked good for 3 or 4 early rounds, and then he's tapered off because he started to gas a bit. But on the opposite side, Richard Lartey, I mean, who knows how good Richard Lartey really is, because honestly, we've got the Daniel Dubois fight to go by. He had brief moments of success, but let's not overstate it. He backed Daniel Dubois up once or twice when they got into some exchanges. It was a fun fight, but ultimately Richard Lartey was stopped. And he does have some issues with that stoppage. So in his quote, he says, see here on screen, "I respect Nathan and know all about him. People still talk about my fight with Daniel Dubois. I wasn't pleased with how the referee stopped the fight against Daniel, and I would like the chance to meet him again." So obviously Richard Lartey not happy with the stoppage. I think it was okay, actually. I mean, Richard Lartey was getting knocked down and it was all going one way, and he would have probably got quite badly hurt. So, I mean, if this is the case that he feels that he was still in the fight, well, he's clearly delusional. But he says that he would like the chance to meet him again, as in Daniel Dubois. Not happening. Richard Lartey is well in the rear view for Daniel Dubois. Richard Lartey is a stepping stone, and that stone has been stepped on already, and he is well in the rear view now. But Nathan Gorman and Richard Lartey, it has the potential to be a fun fight, because we know pretty much what Richard Lartey is going to do based off that fight with Daniel Dubois. And there is some other footage online, but based on what we have seen more recently with that Dubois fight, Richard Lartey's probably going to come forward and look for a knockout punch. He's going to probably have at it with Nathan Gorman, and it will be interesting to see what will Gorman do. How will he respond? Is he going to sort of meet fire with fire, or will he look to stay out of harm's way and rely back on his boxing? Because that was something I think many of us thought he was going to do in the Dubois fight, but ultimately he tried to go to war with Daniel Dubois. And as the guy who was the shorter guy with a much shorter reach, a significantly shorter reach, he's only 73 inches. And Richard Lartey is actually the taller guy here. Even though BoxRec lists Nathan Gorman as 6'4.5", that is certainly, pushing the limits. He's more like about 6'3". Lartey does actually have a height and also a reach advantage of about 4 inches or so. So, I mean, will we see a different version of Richard Lartey utilising that height and reach trying to box? I'm not convinced. I think he's going to basically be pretty easy to read going into this. He'll look to land some shots and knock out Nathan Gorman. And Gorman, as we've seen, can be hit, he can be hurt, he can be taken out. There had been a lot of talk ahead of that fight with Daniel Dubois that Nathan Gorman had basically an iron chin and he couldn't be dented. So who's to say that Richard Lartey cannot land something of note and do a bit of damage here? But I do think it's going to be a fight where Richard Lartey's probably going to be his most effective in the first 3 or 4 rounds. And if Gorman can stay out of harm's way, if he decides to box, he can probably box to a decision or start breaking Lartey down and take him out. I mean, I'd be expecting Nathan Gorman to win this, but I wouldn't be shocked if Richard Lartey puts it on Gorman and has some success in this fight. I mean, it's really sort of hard to say. I mean, how will Gorman approach it? Will he meet fire with fire? Or after that loss to Dubois, does he know that actually he can't lose this? Maybe he has to be slightly more conservative. He has to get a win, and that's the most important thing. But what do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.